The laugh hit the courtroom first, sharp, glittering, and full of a confidence she had not earned. Judge Judy did not flinch. She simply set the file down, the sound echoing like a warning shot. For a heartbeat, the trophy wife smiled as if $500 meant nothing. But the moment Judge Judy lifted her eyes, that smile began to die. What she said next made the man beside her crumble. But before we get into it, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and hit subscribe for more shocking courtroom moments. Her laugh was still shimmering in the air when the camera drifted toward her. A slow, deliberate glide that caught the exact moment her confidence became a mask. Judge Judy had not spoken yet, but the silence felt like a countdown. The trophy wife sat angled toward the audience as if they were here to admire her. She crossed one leg over the other, the heel of her designer shoe tapping lightly against the courtroom floor, not out of nerves, but rhythm. Her rhythm. Her husband, seated beside her, mirrored none of that confidence. His posture folded inward, shoulders sinking, eyes darting between her face and Judge Judy's desk. If her laughter was a bell, his silence was the echo that did not know where to land. The plaintiff stood alone at the opposite side of the room, hands gripping a stack of receipts with the tenderness of someone holding proof of a wound. She did not speak. She barely moved. But there was a quiet strength in the way she kept her gaze forward, never once glancing at the woman who mocked her on the way in. Judge Judy finally lifted the file. The soft rustle of paper cut through the tension like a blade. She placed the folder flat on the desk and looked up slowly, her expression unreadable but unmistakably aware. The trophy wife brightened instantly, smiling wide enough to suggest she believed charm functioned as currency here. It did not. "This will be quick," the wife whispered to her husband, her voice sweet but sharp at the edges, like sugar poured over glass. He nodded without conviction. The camera shifted, catching Judy's eyes narrowing by a fraction as she scanned the first page of the file. She leaned back in her chair, not relaxed but calculating, observing the couple with the quiet authority of someone who had seen this performance hundreds of times and knew how it ended. When Judy spoke, her voice carried the weight of calm thunder. "Let us start with something simple," she said. "Your version of events." The wife lifted her chin. Gladly. She launched into a rehearsed explanation, words polished, tone airy, each sentence decorated with a smile. It was less a statement and more a performance. But Judy's gaze did not soften. She watched the woman the way a mathematician watches a faulty equation, noting each inconsistency with silent precision. The plaintiff's breathing steadied as the wife talked. The husband's fingers fidgeted. A murmur passed through the audience. Then Judy turned a single page in the file. Just one. But the sound was enough to shift the room's temperature. The wife's smile tightened, a hairline crack appearing at the corner of her mouth. Judge Judy looked up, eyes sharp, focused, unblinking. "Before we go any further," Judy said, tapping the page once, "I need you to explain something on this line if you can." The smile on her face faltered for barely a second, but in a room this quiet, even a tremor felt like an earthquake. Judge Judy's eyebrow was still lifted, and somehow that single raised line held more power than any gavel. The trophy wife smoothed her hair, disguising the crack in her confidence with a practiced flick of her wrist. "Of course I can explain it," she said, her tone coated with sweetness that did not match the tension pressing into the room. She leaned forward, elbows delicately placed on the podium, as though proximity to authority could disguise the truth. Her husband stiffened beside her, still silent, still shrinking. The audience watched him almost more than her now, sensing the imbalance, the growing divide between a woman who performed certainty and a man who no longer believed in it. Judge Judy nodded once, a gesture that invited explanation but carried no belief in it. "Go ahead," she said. "I am listening." The wife launched into her narrative again, each word polished like a gemstone held up to the light. She talked confidently, quickly, trying to fill the space with sound before Judy's silence swallowed her whole. But as she spoke, little inconsistencies rose like static interference, dates that did not align, amounts that did not match, events that contradicted her earlier statements. The camera moved closer to Judge Judy's face. She blinked once, slowly, a tell. When Judy interrupted, the room seemed to stop breathing. "That is not what you said earlier," she said, her tone calm but edged with precision. The wife froze mid-sentence. "What do you mean? That is exactly what I said." "No." Judy's voice was steady, pointed, unyielding. "It is not. And I do not appreciate when people assume I am not paying attention." The words landed with the weight of truth pressing against arrogance. The wife's smile dimmed another shade. Her husband's throat bobbed as he swallowed, eyes fixed on the floor. Across the courtroom, the plaintiff lifted her head slightly. Not triumphant, just steady. For the first time, her fingers stopped trembling around the receipts. She watched the unraveling with the kind of quiet that comes from surviving long before justice catches up. The wife regained her composure enough to laugh, but the sound came out thinner, like paper crinkling instead of glass ringing. "Well, maybe you misunderstood." The room stilled. Even the bailiff glanced up. Judge Judy leaned forward, her gaze sharp enough to cut. "I do not misunderstand," she said. "I read." A single line of tension stretched across the courtroom, taut, fragile, and ready to snap. Judy tapped the file again, her finger stopping at a specific entry. "Explain this line right here," she said softly. "If you can." Her hand hovered above the file like she was afraid to touch it, fingers stiff, breath shallow, the first undeniable sign that confidence was beginning to fracture. Judge Judy did not rush her. That stillness, that razor-sharp quiet, was more powerful than any confrontation. The courtroom leaned in without meaning to, pulled toward the tension gathering between the woman's trembling fingertips and the single line on the page that refused to disappear. "I know what it says," the trophy wife whispered, trying to sound composed, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. She cleared her throat, straightened her posture, and began her explanation. Only this time, the words did not arrive smooth and polished. They stumbled, hesitated, collided with one another like they were fighting to escape her mouth. Judge Judy listened without blinking, the kind of stillness that made lies unravel under their own weight. "That is not accurate," the wife insisted after a few seconds, her smile tightening like a bow pulled too far. "I mean it is close, but the date must have been entered incorrectly." "By whom?" Judy asked. The question landed like a stone dropped into a glass bowl. The wife's eyelids fluttered. She glanced at her husband for support, but his face had drained of confidence. He tried to speak, once, but the words turned back before leaving his lips. Judy turned to him. "Do you agree with her answer?" He hesitated. The silence stretched, long enough to become its own kind of confession. I think so," he muttered, though it sounded more like a question than a statement. The plaintiff watched them both with a quiet sorrow rather than satisfaction. She held the receipts closer to her chest, almost protectively. Her breathing steadied, but her eyes carried the ache of someone who had been dismissed too many times. Judy redirected her gaze to the wife. "Earlier you said the charge occurred on the 15th. That line shows the 7th. She tapped the page once. "Would you like to correct yourself?" The wife opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Her jaw quivered, not visibly enough to call attention to it, but enough that the courtroom felt the shift in air pressure. Her performance confidence was dissolving, piece by piece, like porcelain hairline fracturing under heat. She tried again. "It must have been no, I am certain." "Certain?" Judy repeated, voice flat, but sharp. "Because certainty usually requires truth." That word, truth, hit with a finality she could not soften. The wife's eyes darted around the room, searching for someplace safe to land. There was none. Not anymore. The husband's shoulders slumped. The plaintiff exhaled slowly, almost imperceptibly. Judy leaned forward, folding her hands. "Let me ask you something very simple. If your story is accurate, why does every timestamp contradict you?" The file opened wider, not by accident, but with the deliberate calm of a judge who knows exactly where the truth is hiding. A single page slid forward, and the room felt it before anyone saw it. Judge Judy tapped the exposed sheet with one finger. "We are going to look at something you conveniently left out," she said, her voice low but pointed. The trophy wife stiffened, her smile, once dazzling, now twitched like a dying spark. "I did not leave anything out," she insisted, but her voice rose an octave higher than before, the kind of pitch people hit when they feel the ground shifting beneath them. Judy did not acknowledge the protest. She simply rotated the file so the couple could see the page clearly. The camera followed the movement, catching the moment the husband's breath faltered. His lips parted. His eyes scanned the document once, then again, as color drained from his face. The wife leaned in quickly, faster than she meant to. Her hair fell forward in a glossy curtain as she snatched the page with a suddenness that made even the bailiff shift. "It is a mistake," she said, too fast. This cannot be." "Read it," Judy said. The wife's hands trembled, just slightly. But enough. The plaintiff watched from her quiet corner, arms wrapped around her folder as though bracing for something she had spent months waiting for. Even the audience felt the rising pressure, a heat simmering under the fluorescent lights. The wife cleared her throat. "This is just a mix-up, an unrelated line of credit, not ours." The husband turned toward her sharply. "What line of credit?" The wife froze. Her throat tightened visibly. "It is nothing. Just do not worry about it." Judge Judy leaned back, studying their exchange like a scientist observing a reaction she had predicted from the start. "Sir," she said, addressing the husband, "did you authorize this account?" His answer came out crushed. "No." The wife shook her head quickly, desperately. "You did. You must have forgotten." He snapped his gaze toward her, eyes wounded. "I would not forget opening a credit account." The courtroom went silent, a heavy, suffocating silence that revealed more truth than any argument. Judge Judy folded her hands. "This page," she said, tapping the document again, "shows a credit line opened under your husband's name, the same one tied to the charges in dispute." The wife swallowed hard. The husband stared at her like he was looking at a stranger. The plaintiff lowered her eyes, bracing herself for the fallout. Judy's tone sharpened, slicing through whatever illusion the wife thought she could still maintain. "What interests me," she said, "is not just the account, but who opened it." The wife opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Judy leaned in. "I know what you did," she said quietly. "And I doubt he does." His eyes stayed glued to the page, as if the truth printed there was louder than any voice in the courtroom. By the time he finally looked up, the smile on his wife's face had collapsed completely. Judge Judy folded the document back into the file with slow, deliberate precision, the kind that announced the beginning of consequences. The husband's breathing turned shallow, his fingers curling into tight, trembling fists. The wife tried to reach for his arm, but he pulled it away, not harshly, just instinctively, like touching her might burn. "Sir," Judy said, her tone calm but heavy with direction, "did you know this account existed before today?" His answer arrived like a confession. "No, I did not." A murmur rippled through the audience, soft but unmistakable. The plaintiff's shoulders lowered as if she had been holding in more than just frustration, maybe hope that the truth would finally stop moving in circles. The wife raised her chin, trying to reclaim control through posture if not honesty. "It is not as dramatic as it looks," she insisted, voice wobbling. "I opened it because we needed flexibility. He was too busy to handle financial details, so I took initiative." The husband turned toward her slowly. "Using my name without telling me?" She laughed, a hollow, brittle sound compared to the earlier confidence. "Oh, please, you never care about this stuff. I manage everything." "He is overreacting," she said, aiming her last words at the audience rather than him. Judge Judy's expression remained unchanged. "You do not get to decide what he cares about," she said, "especially when it involves his identity and his credit." The wife's face tightened. "It was for us," she insisted, "for our life, our image." "Image," Judy repeated as if tasting the word. "Interesting priority." A heavy pause followed, one of those courtroom silences that feels like it weighs on the bloodstream. The plaintiff stepped forward gently, almost hesitantly. "Judge," she said, voice soft but steady, "this unauthorized account is why the charges fell on me. I kept trying to resolve it privately, but every time I reached out, Her voice caught, not breaking but bruising. She laughed at me. The husband closed his eyes. Not out of anger, out of shame. The wife spun toward the plaintiff. You are exaggerating. It was a misunderstanding. No, Judy said firmly. It was deliberate. The wife swallowed, jaw tightening into defiance. Everyone here is trying to make me the villain. Judy leaned forward. No one has to make you anything. Your actions speak for you. The tension snapped like a pulled wire. The wife's composure ruptured. Her voice rose. Fine, I did what I had to do because no one else would step up. Her husband's face went white. What does that mean? The wife looked at him, really looked at him. And her voice dropped. It means you were never supposed to find out. Her voice cracked before her explanation did, a tiny brittle fracture that echoed louder than any lie she had told. The mask she wore so effortlessly at the start now slipped inch by inch, and everyone in the courtroom felt the unravel begin. Judge Judy watched her closely, not with anger, but with the sharp quiet of someone who had predicted this moment long before it arrived. The wife clutched the podium like it was the last piece of floating debris in a sinking ship. You were never supposed to find out? Judy repeated, each word deliberate, weighted. Explain that. The wife blinked fast, breath hitching. I just meant that it was handled. I was handling it. He does not like dealing with financial pressure, so I stepped in. That is all. The husband stared at her, the disbelief settling across his face like frost. Stepping in is not the same as hiding something. Her cheeks flushed a nervous red. I was protecting us, she said shakily. Protecting our reputation. Judy leaned forward. Your reputation or your lifestyle? The wife's lips parted, then pressed together sharply as if she could trap the truth behind them. But the truth was already leaking out, in the tremor of her hands, the quiver in her eyelids, the thinness in her voice. You are twisting everything, she said, but even she did not sound convinced. The plaintiff shifted her weight, a quiet, steady presence in the corner. She did not speak, but her gaze remained fixed on the woman unraveling before her, not in triumph, but in a kind of exhausted validation. Judy opened the file again. The soft rustle was enough to send a ripple of tension across the room. Here is what I see, Judy said. Every time someone questioned you, you laughed. Every time someone asked for clarity, you deflected. And every time the plaintiff reached out, you dismissed her. That is not protection. That is evasion. The wife inhaled sharply, panic flickering beneath her mascara. I was not evading. I was trying to keep things together. By lying? The husband asked quietly. The question hit her harder than Judy's. Her eyes darted to him, wounded. I did this for us. He shook his head. You did this for you. The room seemed to shrink around her. The lights felt brighter, the air heavier. Every breath she took sounded too loud, too forced. The plaintiff stepped forward, her voice soft but unwavering. I tried to talk to you. Every time you made me feel small. The wife closed her eyes, her shoulders curving inward. For the first time since entering the courtroom, she looked human. Not arrogant, not polished. Just tired and exposed. Judge Judy shut the file slowly, the weight of the gesture settling like a verdict that had not yet been spoken. I have heard enough, she said, her tone steady as stone. Or should I say too much? Judy leaned in, eyes locked on the wife. Before I proceed, there is one more contradiction you will need to address. The silence did not fall. It settled, heavy and deliberate, like dust drifting onto a forgotten photograph. Something in the room shifted, small but unmistakable, and every eye seemed to turn toward the husband. He sat straighter now, not out of confidence, but because the weight of truth was finally landing on him. Judge Judy watched him with an attention that felt surgical. The trophy wife sensed the focus slip from her grasp and reached for it again, speaking before anyone invited her voice back into the space. Judge, this is all being twisted. My husband knows. Judy raised a hand. Just one. The wife's voice cut off mid-syllable. I asked him, Judy said. The husband inhaled sharply. A fragile piece hung in the air, stretched thin. I did not know about the account, he repeated, quieter now, but firmer. And I did not approve anything she did with it. The wife's expression curdled into something between disbelief and desperation. So you are just going to side with them now, after everything I have done for us? You hid things from me, he replied, voice trembling not with anger but realization. Important things. Judge Judy leaned forward, elbows on her desk. Sir, I want to ask you something directly. When the plaintiff reached out to you about the charges, what did you do? His eyes dropped. Shame clung to his shoulders like wet cloth. I forwarded the messages to my wife, he admitted, voice cracking. She told me it was nonsense, that the plaintiff was exaggerating to get attention. A tiny gasp rose from the audience, not dramatic, just the shared intake of people realizing they had been listening to a story with missing pages. The plaintiff exhaled, not in victory, but in weary acknowledgement. She had known this part. She had lived it. The wife tried to smile, but it stretched unevenly. I told you those messages were harassment, she snapped. I was protecting you. From what? He asked. The truth? Her mouth fell open, but no words arrived. A strange stillness took her, like a performer frozen mid-line, suddenly unable to remember the script. Judy watched the exchange, her eyes narrowing slightly. It seems, she said, that the core issue here is not just dishonesty. It is the dynamic that allowed it to grow. The wife bristled. What is that supposed to mean? It means, Judy replied, voice steady as steel, that manipulation thrives when someone chooses not to see it. The words landed with a quiet devastation. The husband closed his eyes. The wife's posture deflated. The plaintiff's grip on her documents loosened, the tension beginning to ease through her fingers. A knock echoed from the clerk's desk, a small, accidental sound, but enough to break the moment. Judy opened a drawer and retrieved a slim, sealed envelope. The wife's face drained of color. Judy placed the envelope on the desk with calm finality. You have not seen this yet, she said, but you should have. The envelope landed with a soft, papery thud, harmless in sound, devastating in implication. The wife flinched as though Judy had placed a live wire on the desk. Judge Judy slid the envelope forward with one fingertip, the motion slow enough to stretch tension across the room like pulled thread. Open it, she said. The wife did not move. The husband did. He reached for the envelope with unsteady hands, the kind of trembling that comes only when someone begins to realize their life may not look the way they thought it did. He tore the seal carefully, as if the truth inside could bite. The first page slipped out, a glossy color printout. The camera zoomed in on the husband's reaction, eyes widening, lips parting, breath stolen before he could catch it. Screenshots, messages, time-stamped evidence. The wife lunged toward him, trying to snatch the page, but he turned away, holding it out of reach. You told me you never spoke to her, he whispered, voice thin with disbelief. Judge Judy nodded toward the document. It appears you did, extensively. The plaintiff's eyes trembled. She had seen those messages, reread them, felt the sting of each condescending dismissal. Seeing them here, under courtroom lights, stripped the humiliation of its power and replaced it with something steadier vindication. The wife let out a strained laugh, the kind people use when they have nothing left but denial. Those are out of context. She provoked me. You know how people can be. Judy raised her brow. The timestamps show your messages began the conversation, repeatedly. I was clarifying things, the wife insisted. By calling her pathetic and telling her to stop pretending to be a victim? Judy asked. The wife's throat tightened. She was being dramatic. The plaintiff took a small step forward. I was asking for help, she said quietly. You ridiculed me. The silence that followed was thick enough to feel. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum more softly, as if the room knew yelling was unnecessary. The truth was loud enough. The husband stared at the screenshots again, every line carving new fault lines across his expression. You lied to me, he said, not loudly, but with a weight that made the wife flinch deeper than any shout could. I lied for us, she snapped, voice breaking. I was handling it because you never want to. Stop, he whispered. Please. The room shifted. Power, once clutched tightly in her manicured hands, now slipping away grain by grain. Judge Judy folded her hands. These messages, combined with the credit account, show intentional manipulation, not misunderstanding. The wife's jaw clenched, eyes darting like someone searching for a final escape route. But none existed. The husband lowered the screenshots, his face hollowed by realization. He whispered, barely audible but unmistakable. There is something I never told you. His whisper lingered in the air like a tremor, small, almost fragile, yet powerful enough to tilt the entire courtroom on its axis. The wife's head snapped toward him, eyes wide, searching his face for loyalty he no longer had. Judge Judy straightened in her chair, her gaze sharpening with interest. Something you never told her? She repeated. Go on. The husband swallowed hard. His fingers tightened around the screenshot printouts until the paper crinkled in protest. I knew something was wrong months ago, he said. Before any of this. The wife's breath stuttered. What are you talking about? You knew what? He did not look at her. Could not. His eyes stayed on the screenshotted messages, as though reading them again might finally explain how they had reached this moment. She reached out to me, he said softly, nodding toward the plaintiff. She tried to warn me. The courtroom air thickened instantly, the kind of heaviness that arrives when truth begins stitching itself together. The plaintiff's eyes lowered, not ashamed, but tired. I told him about the charges, she said quietly. I told him someone was using his name. Judge Judy's attention swung back to the husband. And what did you do with that information? His answer cracked like thin ice under pressure. I forwarded it to her. The wife recoiled as though struck. You sent it to me because you trust me, because you know how dramatic people can be. He finally looked at her, not with anger, but heartbreak. I sent it to you because I believed you would handle it, he said, not weaponize it. The wife let out a sharp, stumbling breath. Weaponize? I never... You mocked her, he said, voice trembling. You told me she was exaggerating. You told me not to bother with it. You told me... He cut himself off, jaw tightening, as emotion threatened to unravel the last strands of his composure. Judge Judy broke the silence. So you chose to ignore the plaintiff because your wife told you to? His shoulders sank. Yes. The plaintiff flinched, not out of anger, but from the sting of being dismissed so easily, a pain she had carried for months without acknowledgement. Judy nodded slowly, the movement deliberate. Silence, she said, is not neutral. It allows harm to grow. The wife's voice cracked. You are blaming him now for trying to trust me? No one is blaming him, Judy replied calmly, but trust without truth is nothing more than denial. The words hit harder than any accusation. The wife's eyes glistened, her breathing uneven, her entire posture folded inward, as if the room had suddenly become too bright for the lies she was trying to shield. The husband looked down at his hands. Shame, heavy and human, settled across his expression. A ripple of emotion passed through the audience. Sympathy, disbelief, recognition. Judge Judy let the silence linger, letting its weight speak. Then she lifted the file again, flipping to another marked page. She looked at the wife. Tell me, she said, voice quietly piercing, why did you need him to believe her pain was imaginary? His confession was still hanging in the air when the wife's breath hitched, a fragile, uneven sound, like someone realizing the script they memorized no longer applied. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed, sensing the moment the facade would finally crack. The wife took a step back from the podium, only half an inch, but enough to show fear blooming beneath the polished exterior she'd clung to since the first laugh she'd let loose. Why are you making this about me? She demanded, voice trembling against her will. He ignored the warning. He did that. Judy didn't flinch. I heard his part, she said evenly. Now I want to hear yours. The wife opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, the words struggling to form coherent meaning. I I told him the plaintiff was exaggerating because he never handles stress well. I was trying to prevent a meltdown. The husband let out a sharp, humorless breath. A meltdown? You mean you did not want to explain what you were doing? Her eyes flickered toward him, panic shimmering behind mascara that no longer looked perfect. I was protecting us, she said again, but the words landed flat, hollow, stripped of authority. Judge Judy tapped the file with 2 fingers, gentle, precise, devastating. Your pattern is consistent. When confronted with responsibility, you deflect. When challenged, you minimize. And when someone is harmed by your choices, you call them dramatic. The wife's throat tightened. That is not fair. It is factual, Judy replied. The plaintiff took a small breath, her voice soft but unshaking. All I ever asked for was honesty. Every time I reached out, you made me feel like I was the problem. The wife's jaw quivered. I did not mean to. But you did, the husband cut in, his voice a quiet fracture. You meant it enough to keep going. A long silence swallowed the room, not empty, but unbearably full. The wife's hands began to tremble visibly, her knuckles blanching as she gripped the edge of the podium. Her gaze darted from her husband to the plaintiff, to Judy, searching for even one sympathetic face. None came. Judy leaned forward, voice low, steady. You have been performing strength, she said. But strength does not come from laughter or dismissiveness. It comes from truth, and the truth is beginning to show. The wife blinked rapidly, breath speeding up as though her own defenses were suffocating her. Her voice lowered to a rasp. I thought if I handled everything, no one would judge me. The husband's expression softened, not enough to excuse, but enough to hurt. I was never judging you, he said. I was trusting you. Her eyes glistened. A dangerous tremor rolled through her shoulders, the kind that signals a person finally seeing the consequences they tried so hard to outrun. Judge Judy closed the file, not harshly, but with a weight that felt like inevitability settling over every person in the room. She fixed her gaze on the unraveling wife. Then tell the truth now, Judy said. What were you really afraid of? The question landed like a spotlight, illuminating every shadow she had tried to hide behind. Her lips parted, but no sound followed, only a trembling inhale that revealed more truth than any answer she could force out. Judge Judy waited, not impatiently, not accusingly, just waited. And somehow, that silence became the most powerful force in the room. The wife's hands dropped from the podium, falling uselessly to her sides. Her posture shifted, shoulders rounding inward as though the weight of months, maybe years, had finally pressed too hard to resist. She opened her eyes slowly, and for the first time since entering the courtroom, she did not look angry or smug or performative. She looked scared. I wasn't afraid of her, she whispered, nodding toward the plaintiff. I was afraid of him. The husband's breath caught. Me? She nodded again, her gaze dropping to the floor. You judge me without even meaning to. Every time you look disappointed, I feel like I'm disappearing, so I tried to keep everything perfect. I thought if I handled the money, the image, the mess, you wouldn't see how much I was struggling. The husband's expression softened, disbelief mixing with heartbreak. Judge Judy's voice cut gently through the moment. Struggling does not justify deception. Harming someone else to hide your insecurity is not protection. It is manipulation. The wife's chin trembled. I know, she whispered. But I kept thinking, if he sees me fail, he'll leave. He'll stop loving me. I couldn't let that happen. Emotion flickered across the plaintiff's face. Not sympathy, not forgiveness, but recognition of a truth finally spoken aloud. Judy flipped to another page of the file. This began long before the disputed charges, she said. Your patterns of control, secrecy, and dismissal go back months, maybe years. The wife nodded weakly, tears filling the spaces between her lashes. I kept telling myself I would fix it before he ever found out, that he'd never have to know. But the deeper it got, the more terrified I became. And so, Judy said, you made someone else pay for your fear. The plaintiff's breath tightened, so did the husband's. The wife wiped her cheek, her voice a faint thread. I never meant to hurt her. I just didn't know how to stop. The husband leaned forward slightly, voice cracking. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you trust me? Her eyes rose to his, full of a pain that had no place to go. Because trusting you meant letting you see the truth, and I was afraid the truth wouldn't be enough. The courtroom stilled. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum more quietly, as though respecting confession when it finally found its voice. Judy closed the file gently, her tone shifting, still firm, but laced with something deeper. Fear is not an excuse, she said. But it is a clue. The wife blinked. A clue to what? Judy held her gaze, unblinking. To what you've really been hiding. The wife swallowed hard as the room leaned into the silence. There is something you have not told anyone, Judy said softly. And it changes everything. Her confession hovered in the air like a fragile shard of glass. One wrong breath, and it would shatter. The wife's shoulders trembled, not from defiance this time, but from the unbearable weight of everything she'd been holding back. Judge Judy didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence was the scalpel that cut through whatever defenses the wife still attempted to hold. The wife's fingers curled inward, nails pressing into her palms as if grounding herself through pain. Her eyes glistened, unfocused, as she finally let her posture collapse. All the practiced elegance, the poise, the curated confidence, they drained out of her slowly, visibly, like water leaking from a cracked vase. I wasn't trying to be cruel, she whispered. I was trying to survive. The husband's lips parted, confusion softening into sorrow. Survive what? He asked gently. Me? She shook her head. Myself. For a moment, the courtroom wasn't a courtroom. It felt like the private corner of a life unraveling, exposed to strangers, illuminated under harsh lights that allowed no shadows to hide in. When I met you, she said, voice trembling, I felt like I finally mattered, like I wasn't just someone passing through other people's lives. I wanted to be worth something, worth you, worth the life I thought we were building. The husband blinked, stunned by a vulnerability he'd never been permitted to see. But I could never keep up with the image, she continued. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw someone temporary, someone who had to earn her place every day. So I tried to make our life look perfect, expensive, impressive. If I kept everything polished, maybe no one would see how scared I was. The plaintiff's expression shifted, still guarded, but softened at the edges, understanding the humanity even without excusing the harm. The wife's breath cracked. When the money didn't stretch, I panicked. I thought if he sees me fail, he'll walk away. If she nodded toward the plaintiff, exposes me, he'll leave. So I tried to fix it before anyone noticed. I tried to make it disappear. Judge Judy's voice arrived like a steady heartbeat. And instead, you made yourself disappear. The wife's knees almost buckled. I didn't want to lose him, she whispered. I didn't want to lose everything I thought I was supposed to be. And the plaintiff? Judy asked. Where did she fit into your survival? Tears slipped down the wife's face. She was proof I wasn't surviving. A collective breath moved through the room, a quiet recognition of a truth neither dramatic nor vindicating, but painfully human. The husband took a step toward her, not close enough to comfort, but close enough to hear her breaking. You could have told me, he murmured. I would have stayed. Her eyes squeezed shut. I didn't believe that. Judge Judy leaned forward, hands clasped, gaze unwavering. Fear explains your behavior. It does not excuse it, and it does not undo the harm. The wife nodded through tears, absorbing a truth heavier than any ruling. She lifted her gaze to the plaintiff. Can I say something to her? She asked, voice barely a breath. The request drifted into the silence like a trembling note, small, uncertain, but impossible to ignore. The plaintiff lifted her eyes, bracing herself. Judge Judy gave a single slow nod. If you have something to say, she said, say it now. The wife stepped forward. Her movements were unsteady, stripped of elegance. For the first time, she looked nothing like the woman who had strutted into the courtroom with laughter dripping from her lips. She looked like someone standing in the ruins of her own bravado. She turned toward the plaintiff. Her breath caught. Her voice broke on the first word. "I'm sorry." The word didn't fall cleanly. It cracked on the way down, splintered by months of denial, deflection, and cruelty. The courtroom remained still, not out of sympathy, but out of respect for the fragility of confession. "I shouldn't have talked to you the way I did," she continued, her voice trembling. "You were asking for help, and I treated you like you were beneath me. I did that because I was scared. Not because you deserved it." The plaintiff swallowed hard. Her grip on the receipts tightened. The apology wasn't a balm. It was a reopening. The wife glanced back at her husband as though searching for strength, but none came. She exhaled shakily. "I thought if I kept everything together, no one would see how overwhelmed I was. And when you came to me, pointing out mistakes I had made, it felt like a spotlight on every insecurity I tried to hide." The plaintiff blinked slowly, absorbing the words with a measured calm. "But that's not your fault," the wife admitted. "It wasn't fair. I made you feel like a nuisance, like someone who was overreacting, and I'm ashamed of that. Truly." Her voice collapsed into the next sentence. "I'm sorry for the money. I'm sorry for the messages. I'm sorry I made you feel small." A few sniffles echoed from the audience, but Judy remained stone still, watching not the words, but the tone behind them. The sincerity wasn't perfect. It wavered. It stumbled. It carried truth, but still tangled with fear. The plaintiff stepped forward slightly. Her response arrived quiet, steady, a voice shaped by dignity rather than anger. "I appreciate your apology," she said, "but being scared doesn't erase what you did to me. You humiliated me when all I wanted was clarity. You ignored my messages, mocked me, made me feel like I was the problem." The wife nodded, tears slipping freely now. "I know, and I'm sorry." "And," the plaintiff continued, voice soft but firm, "your apology doesn't fix the damage, but it does let me understand why you acted the way you did. Not excuse it, understand it." Something inside the wife crumbled at that distinction. The husband looked between them, remorse carved into every line of his face. Judge Judy inhaled slowly, the kind of breath that signaled the approach of judgment. She turned her gaze toward the wife. "Before I rule," she said, tone tightening, "I need you to answer one final question." Judy paused, eyes narrowing. "Would you have stopped if you hadn't been caught?" The question hovered between them like a blade suspended midair, silent, gleaming, impossible to outrun. For the first time all day, the trophy wife didn't reach for words. She reached for breath. Judge Judy watched her with the sort of stillness that forces truth to rise whether a person is ready or not. The courtroom remained frozen, as though the lights themselves tightened their focus to catch the smallest flicker in her expression. "Would you have stopped?" Judy repeated softly. "If you hadn't been caught?" The wife's lips parted. No words came. Her gaze darted toward her husband, searching, pleading, collapsing. But he looked away, jaw clenched, eyes glassy with the ache of someone realizing love doesn't survive without truth. Seconds passed in silence. Real seconds. The kind that press on a person's ribs. The wife swallowed hard. I wanted to," she whispered. "That is not what I asked," Judy said. Her voice was not cruel. It was clear, precise, the kind of clarity people fear because it leaves no shadow to hide inside. The wife's shoulders wilted, words trembled at the edge of her mouth, then died. Her silence thickened, filling the room with its unmistakable answer. The plaintiff inhaled slowly, eyes turning downward, not in victory, but in recognition. She had known this. She had felt it in every ignored message, every ridiculed attempt to resolve the issue, every laugh thrown her way like a weapon. The wife squeezed her eyes shut. "I didn't know how to stop," she finally whispered, voice barely a thread. "Every time I thought about telling the truth, I panicked. I kept thinking, if I just fix this one last mistake, everything will go back to normal. "But you didn't fix it," Judy said calmly. "You buried it." The wife nodded, the movement small, agonizing. "I was ashamed. Every day, more than the last." The husband turned toward her, pain softening his expression but not erasing it. "You should have come to me," he said. "I would have helped you. You didn't have to do this alone." Her voice cracked. "I didn't want you to see me fail," Judy interjected gently. "Failure isn't what destroys relationships. Dishonesty does." A hush swept through the room, the kind of silence that doesn't need audience permission to be profound. The plaintiff lifted her head, steadying herself, preparing for the verdict she had waited months to hear. Judy straightened in her chair, the authority in her posture signaling that the emotional exploration was over. Now came consequence. "I have everything I need to make a ruling," she said. The wife's breath faltered. The husband swallowed. Even the bailiff seemed to brace himself, sensing the gravity tightening like a closing fist. Judge Judy reached for the gavel, her fingers curling around the handle with calm deliberation. She raised it. Higher, higher still. But she didn't strike. Not yet. Her gaze locked onto the wife one final time. "Before this gavel falls," Judy said, voice steady as judgment itself, "you need to understand exactly what you've done." The gavel hovered in the air like a held breath. Not threatening, not dramatic, but inevitable. The wife stared at it as though watching her own reflection tremble in the polished wood. Then, finally, Judge Judy lowered her hand. But she didn't strike yet. She spoke first. "When people hide behind arrogance," Judy said, her voice low and controlled, "it is usually because they fear what honesty might reveal." The wife's eyes glistened, her posture folding in on itself once more. The husband stood stiff beside her, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. The plaintiff watched quietly from her corner, dignity wrapped around her like armor she had earned the hard way. Judy rested the gavel on the bench. "This case is not complicated," she continued. "The facts are clear, the harm is clear, and the responsibility is unmistakable." The wife's breath quickened. Judy turned to the plaintiff. "You were ignored, belittled, and financially harmed. Your attempts to fix the situation were mocked. Your patience was taken advantage of. And yet, you stood here today with composure and clarity. That speaks volumes about who you are." A faint tremor passed through the plaintiff's lips. Not a smile, but something close to relief. Then Judy faced the wife. "And you," she said, her tone sharpening just 1 degree, "hid behind an image instead of facing the consequences of your actions. You let fear turn into deception, and when confronted, you dismissed the truth with laughter." The wife winced, a visible recoil. "This court does not reward deception," Judy continued. "It does not reward arrogance, and it certainly does not reward cruelty disguised as confidence." The husband lowered his head. He didn't defend her. Not anymore. Judy lifted the gavel again, but her voice carried the weight of the ruling before the strike did. "You will reimburse the plaintiff for the full amount she is owed," she said, "and you will pay an additional $500 for wasting her time, damaging her dignity, and abusing this court's patience." The wife closed her eyes, not from anger this time, but acceptance. Judy shifted her gaze to the husband. "And you," she said, gentler but firm, "enabled this by refusing to confront what you suspected. Silence can injure just as deeply as lies. I suggest you take accountability and rebuild trust with transparency, not avoidance." He nodded, swallow thick, voice too broken for words. The gavel fell. Not loudly. Just firmly, like truth settling into its rightful place. The echo resonated across the courtroom, filling every corner with the finality of justice delivered not in rage, but in clarity. The plaintiff exhaled with a release so soft it barely existed, yet it carried months of weight off her shoulders. The wife wiped her tears, not dramatically, but quietly, humility finally overtaking performance. Judge Judy gathered her papers, her final words simple, unadorned, and unforgettable. "Arrogance collapses. Truth doesn't." And just like that, the case was closed. But its lesson lingered, echoing long after the cameras stopped rolling.